G'day, good evening, happy Sunday, wherever you happen to be. This is our look back at one heck of a year. But unlike most of the look backs, which, let's be honest, this team won the footy and Larry Emder won the gold and Trump won and that's it. We're going to go deep dive. You know that's the way that we like to do it on this show. And think of this more so as a, rather than year in review, more like a performance review. And I'm playing the role of the HR manager. That's shaky for everyone. Now, let us break this down into some Australian politics, some general news, and obviously everything that happened in the United States. Now, about this time last year, the Prime Minister was down in the polls, down in his luck, and it looked like he wasn't going to be able to change the subject. In fact, the media was so down on him at the end of 2023, one full year ago. They were writing headlines like this: the promises to Australia that Anthony Albanese has broken. His year in review. Anthony Albanese facing calls to resign as the Prime Minister after The Voice had failed. And Newspoll 12 months ago said that Anthony Albanese was a drag on Labor's recovery. Then, of course, summer happens and that gives the Prime Minister great hope and pep in his step that somehow everything will be different this year. According to the Guardian newspaper, they said that last year had brought the Prime Minister back to earth, but 2024, what's it going to hold for Dutton or Albanese? Now, interestingly, the person who had actually written that thesis about whether it was going to be a good year for Albo and a bad year for Dutton was Murpharoo, otherwise known as the chief political correspondent for The Guardian. Somebody who was, of course, such an independent journalist that she could not be accused of picking a side. Until she picked a side. She literally left The Guardian to work for Anthony Albanese. But back to what was going on at the start of this year, where the Prime Minister was telling anyone who'll listen that it's time for a reset. We're going to get our game back. The Prime Minister 2.0, kind of reboot of Albanese's office ensure victory. People were rather excited. Well, they weren't. They just were people in the press that have been desperate to breathe life into this Prime Ministership year after year after year, and it's only 2 and 3 years old. This was also because cost of living has been the python that has hurt this Prime Minister, exposed this government, and has pushed voters further away from Labor than even at the last election when they had their lowest primary in more than 100 years. The polling going into this great reset for 2024, oh so long ago, and they're going to need another one soon, was that more than 80% of Australians believe that the government has failed to tackle cost of living crisis. That was at the start of this year. So, a special game changer was brought in. The Prime Minister who was going to reset his fortunes this year by offering too little, too late tax cuts.
The position hasn't changed, so it's very clear.
When it comes to the stage 3 tax cuts, our position hasn't changed.
We haven't changed our position on that. Well, we haven't changed our position on that, Michael. We haven't changed our position on the stage 3 tax cuts at all.
Oh, did I say that they were going to do a tax cut change? No. That was them promising they were definitely not going to do one. But then, of course, as you know, they did one. The Prime Minister goes to the ultimate home game for Labor politicians, the National Press Club, where basically the same people who lick his boots at the Parliament lick his boots, but this time at the bottom of the hill.
I announce that from the 1st of July this year, our government will deliver a tax cut for every single Australian taxpayer. All 13.6 million taxpayers, not just some. Everyone who works and who pays tax will benefit.
But with polls saying that 80% of people did not believe that the government had actually done anything to make their financial life better, the polls in a place where the Prime Minister needed to take a big swing like this, it was his mates in the media who were ready to pack-a-whacker this bloke back to political life. And they were using the biggest possible numbers to make it seem like Christmas had come twice in just a few weeks.
11.5 million will be better off, 2 million worse off. The government more than doubling tax cuts for most Aussie workers by halving them for the country's highest earners. The biggest winners? Everyone earning less than 150k who'll be better off.
The biggest is to keep the 37% tax bracket, but raise the threshold for it from $120,000 to $135,000. Modelling by ANU economist Ben Phillips estimates that more than 6 million households will be better off from the changes, with just over 1 million worse off.
I know it's a serious subject, but do you even have to sound that bored with it? Anyway, the numbers were huge. The headline said things like, most taxpayers will get $804 back when it comes to the tax cuts. But guess what? This little TV show was able to work out straight away. Too little, too late. 4/5 bugger all. In fact, the reality of the breakdown, as we showed you over and over and over again, is that the Great Reset, which was going to rebuild the Prime Minister, wasn't really much at all. In fact, if you earned about $45,000, you were going to get the best part of, what, $14 a week? You see, that's how people actually pay their tax. They pay it like they earn their money. They do it week by week, or fortnightly by fortnightly, or monthly by monthly. The idea that you only have to pay tax once a year and therefore the reduction is $800, was all garbage. And we knew it at the time. The Canberra bubble tried to pretend nothing to see here in their Jedi mind trick way of trying to start 2024 because 2023 had ended so poorly. But we knew that people weren't going to connect. And slowly but surely the polls started to prove that theory right. This was from the Turnbull Times. This was after the tax cuts had been announced, had been rammed down everyone's throats politically, where 53% of people had hardly heard anything or nothing at all about the tax cuts. Even when you broke it down. Female voters, and isn't it the Liberal Party that has the problem with women? Well, in fact, the best part there, of 63% of them. 63% of them had not heard of what had happened here. And when you broke it down by men and women, more than 60%, if my maths are right, yeah, more than 60% of women had not heard anything or much at all about the tax cuts. So the Prime Minister's first big swing at a big reset to put himself back on top was a miss. But he had a new excuse to say, everything's okay. I'm going to win the next election.